Today, the filters that I use out in the field, the general which types of filters along with some specific images and examples, as well as these particular Kase magnetic filters that I love and advocate and exactly how they work and some tips for them based on some questions I've had. I'm also going to issue a correction about capacities and using these external anchor battery banks to recharge your batteries in the field. Well, hey everyone, Hudson here. Welcome to this week's Approaching the Scene. I've had a number of questions lately from people who've either purchased my Kase filters or are interested in them and have questions, or just people in general asking me about when to use what filter. Why don't I use graduated neutral densities? That seems like a question that I constantly get. So I'm going to talk about what filters I use, how I use them, show you some examples. And I'm going to really quickly go through how the Kase filter set that I love, recommend, and sell works together, particularly for people who use the HB-97 Nikon system, but just in general with adapters too. I also want to clear up a quick misconception, a mistake that I made, a correction about the capacity of these anchor batteries that I recommend for people. We'll talk about that in a second. First, some really quick announcements. Office hours on the 12th, that's the big free get-together photography meeting for anybody that wants to talk about anything photographic. We'll take your questions, we'll do Q&A. Rick, Woody, David, Darren, we're all gonna be there Tuesday morning, 10 a.m., April 12th, 10 a.m. Pacific. Sign up at hudsonhenry.com/office hours, and you can leave your questions there. We're gonna take questions. We're also gonna go through some of the really fun adventure stories that we had on the workshops in Death Valley, as well as Joshua Tree last month. Just an awesome time with amazing groups of photographers. It was really a special couple of workshops. I also have kind of a little bit of a sad announcement. The custom tripods that I build, the Leofoto 324CL Manfrotto 500AH custom build, I have all the parts, I'm sending those out, but we have gotten increases in the pricing from our suppliers. You can blame whoever you want for it or whatever you want for it, but our prices are going up. The same thing with the 284, my little ultra lightweight 4-pound system. So the 4-pound system and the big fluid head 7-pound system are both going up $100 each. So that's going to happen this Friday night. It's at the end of the night, Pacific time, Saturday morning, midnight turning to 0 hour Pacific time. So if you're on the fence about one of these tripods, you save $100 ordering it before Friday night. We just have to up the price when we resupply with the next bunch of parts. And I have a lot of parts to build these. I can get them out the door fast. So just a little heads up, prices are going up $100. And you can find all that stuff at hudsonhenry.com/tripods. It's always there. Links to everything I'm talking about are in this video's description, along with a chaptered out table of contents so you can jump to the content that you want to watch or rewatch. And links to everything that I talk about, all the gear that I recommend and use is at hudsonhenry.com/ATS links. That's always updated. And those links help me out, and I so appreciate your using them and sharing and subscribing and liking this channel. It makes a huge difference. All right, so I'm gonna start with corrections. One of my favorite YouTubers to watch is Seth Meyers. He's been just an inspiration through this last couple of years, watching his From Home and then Back to the Studio broadcast. And he's come up with this segment called Corrections, where he takes corrections from people out there that catch him saying the wrong thing. I made a huge faux pas actually today when I sent out an email announcing Nikon's new 800 millimeter f6.3 telephoto PF lens. It's ultra light. It's way more affordable than expected for an 800 6.3. It's only $6,500, and you know that sounds expensive, but you contrast it with the new one that Canon brought out that's a third of a stop faster, much bigger, $17,000. I mean, you could buy a Z9, the 800 millimeter lens, and a new Max Studio for the price of the Canon lens. So it is kind of an affordable dream lens. Lots of people are going to be buying it. Anyone who loves sports and wildlife and has the cash to get that system. So if you want one, I'm putting a link in this video's description as well. I would get on the pre-order list fast. So that was a correction. I sent out an email. I said f5.6. I don't know. It was like I'd just gotten up in the morning, gotten the kids to school, realized I should put the word out so that people in my audience know that it's there and they should pre-order it if they haven't already. And I hadn't had my coffee. I put f5.6. I know it says f6.3. I've gotten lots of corrections today via email. Another correction that I got from Carl that is actually one of those examples that I often give when I'm out on workshops or responding to YouTube comments and emails is that I learn as much from the people that I'm teaching as I learn from books and other pro photographers. You know, I've often said, you know, that this Z9 battery, for example, is 3,300 milliamps. So I've always thought of that sort of as the capacity. And these Anker batteries that I recommend people buy, because you can either plug them in via USB-C to the charger and charge your camera's battery, or you can plug them in via USB-C right into the camera, and its power delivery system will keep your camera running for a night shoot while it's charging the battery. Or you can plug it into either one in your bag and be charging your battery, you know, while you're moving around between shoots. Instead of buying these $230 batteries, you can get this $60 battery, which is 20,000 milliamps. Well, now I kind of did the math and I said, well, that's 6 of these batteries. And Carl pointed out that comparing milliamps from one battery to another is like comparing apples to oranges. You really need to look at watt hours. And there's a really cool, if you're curious about that, there's a cool explanation. It's succinct, it makes sense from Wirecutter that I will put in the description to this video. But essentially, when it comes to watt hours, the Z9's battery is 36 watt hours. The Anker battery is 72 watt hours. So in reality, you can charge your camera battery twice. Now still, to me, that's 60 bucks for 2 of these batteries, or $460 for 2 of these batteries. I still think that these little Anker 20,000 milliamp power delivery bricks that I put in my links are well worth it. I'm going to put a link again in this video, but it is a correction. I said it could charge it 6 times. I haven't obviously tried it in practice. It certainly charges it very rapidly and easily one time, whether using the battery charger or in the camera. And now we know via watt hours, it's 2 times. So thanks, Carl. I learned something from that and I know better now. Okay, so I've had some people actually asking me a lot of questions about the Kase magnetic filters that I use, advocate, love. One question that I often get is, you know, does it come with a magnetic ring? Well, if you buy, you know, the 112 millimeter filter kit that I have here that goes with Nikon's awesome nifty HB-97 112 millimeter hood that fits a whole bunch of lenses, then yes, it comes with this one magnetic 112 millimeter ring. If you buy the 82 millimeter kit that I advocate, it comes with a single 82 millimeter ring. If you buy an individual filter through my store, it comes with a ring. Each filter comes with one of these rings in the size of the filter. So, you know, what you can do, there are these little squared off edges. You'll see it if you get one of these that lets you kind of put your fingernails on it and get a grip on it and spin it. So you take your HB-97 hood here, or the lens you want to mount it on, and you just thread it in. And I leave this little ring threaded into my HB-97 hood at all times. I just get my fingernail on the edge of that little groove. It's like a spanner wrench catch for people who are mechanically adept. You could use a spanner wrench to remove it. There it is. It's snugged in, doesn't need to be very tight. And now any filter that I drop in there will just magnetically attach. When I'm using a lens like my new 24-120 that doesn't fit the HB-97 hood, I keep a little adapter in my kit with filters. So this is my UV filter. If I'm out in blowing sand or rough conditions, I'll put the UV filter just to protect the lens, and I just thread that 77 to 112 millimeter adapter right under the lens. If I don't want the UV, it's as simple as pulling it off. Now, I've had some people, you know, ask about how strong are these magnetic adapters and magnetic rings. Well, you know, it's not going anywhere just by gravity or even bouncing around. What can happen though, you know, I wouldn't run around with this bouncing on my side up against a camera bag or something, because if it takes a glancing blow, it breaks that magnetic bond. The minute the magnetic bond breaks, you know, which you need to be able to do to pull the filter on and off. So, you know, they're really strong, but don't run around with it bouncing on your side with a filter on it. That's the case. So when I want to switch, I can pull the UV filter out and slip my circular polarizer on. Boom, I'm spinning a circular polarizer. In this little case, I have UV, circular polarizer, 3, 6, and 10 stop neutral density filters, as well as a neutral night filter. It really is just as simple as slapping those on there. For those of you with the Nikon Z system, the HB-97 hood, which comes with the 14 to 24 millimeter lens, fits into the hood bayonet for the 14 to 24, and you can just click, drop a filter, or even stack filters right inside that hood, just as easy as can be. Sometimes it's tough to get one off without the other, but you just kind of use 2 fingers. It's not that bad. And the amazing thing is that even though these are 112 millimeter filters, they're not that big. This little case is not a big thing to throw in my camera bag. This hood is not a big thing to throw in my camera bag. And you never worry about vignetting, even stacking up filters with this system. The other thing I love about it, I'll take my neutral night filter off here for a second. The other thing I love about it is the fact that it fits the 14 to 30, the 14 to 24. This HB-97 hood, here's my 70 to 200 2.8. You just get it lined up here, click, it fits just as easily as it does on the 14 to 24, and you can buy it separately if you don't have the 14 to 24. And now you grab a filter and click, boom, no worry about vignetting with that sucker. So this hood works with the 70 to 200, the 24 to 70 2.8, the 14 to 24 2.8, so all 3 of the Trinity 2.8 zoom lenses. It works with the 14 to 24, it works with the 14 to 30, and it works with the 51.2. Those are all confirmed. I keep getting people asking me, does it really fit the 14 to 30? Yes, I've used it a ton. It fits all of those listed lenses. I'm just sad it doesn't fit on the 100 to 400 or the 24 to 70, but both of those work slick as can be with this 77 to 112 millimeter adapter. So it really is that simple, and these filters are awesome. All right, so let's wrap up here by talking about why these are the set of filters that I carry. Why do I always have a circular polarizer, a set of neutral density filters, and a neutral night filter? The neutral night filter, you know, is something I kind of scoffed at originally, but I don't go anywhere where I might shoot at night without it anymore. It just increases the quality of my images. So let's have a look at why I take the circular polarizer first. All right, so why do I really never go out without a circular polarizer? Well, there's a lot of things the circular polarizer does for you, including just controlling reflections in general. But in the landscape, you know, if you have a look at this image from out in the Main Valley and Death Valley in this most recent workshop, and you have a look at, you know, it's sort of late in the day, but not sunset yet, flat, kind of light, but we're looking off to the south. And when you're looking north or south with the sun off your right or your left shoulder, that's when polarizer is really going to work. There's no difference between these 2 focus stacked images. I've done no raw processing on them except for putting a polarizer on. That's all that's different, is just putting that polarizer and turning it until it cuts through the reflectivity in the haze of the air and just blues up the sky, adds contrast and depth to those mountains. You know, there's no real easy way to do that in post-processing. It just isn't. So a huge difference. It just is going to boost your color in situations like this. You know, the other time is in green forests and wet conditions, and you can just, you know, turn that polarizer and watch the scene green up because it's cutting through all the reflectivity. You can control whether or not you're seeing through the reflection on the surface of the water to the beautiful rocks down beneath, or whether you magnify that reflection on the water, or whether you intensify it and make it the star of the show. But you know, when I'm out in situations like this, blue sky days, you can just make the contrast between the clouds and the sky pop. You know, you wouldn't get this much contrast out of a straight raw image as I did here in Mesquite Dunes in Death Valley without the polarizer. And even if you don't have that much of the sky, it's going to help you cut through some of that haze and really make contrast and details stand out when you're perpendicular to the sun. The sun is off your right shoulder or your left shoulder. It doesn't work very well facing straight into the sun or with it at your back. But you know, it's something I reach for in the landscape constantly, and it just helps me get crisper, more contrasty, but naturally saturated, beautiful images. One thing you gotta be aware of, you know, I did not use it in this image. This image is shot at 14 millimeters. You know, if you're working with an ultra wide angle, it can see too much sky at the same time, and if it's looking to the west and to the north, you know, or the north by northwest, part of the sky that's off to the west where the sun is or where it's behind is just not going to polarize as well. So you get these blotchy skies. I would much rather just work with the sky I've got in these kinds of situations and blue it up a little in post-production. It's a dangerous thing to have the sky in an image with the polarizer on an ultra wide angle lens. So you got to be a little bit wary of that. All right, so the circular polarizer is just key. I don't leave ever to go photographing without the circular polarizer. The neutral night filter, as I just said, it adds quality. You know, let me show you how it affects night sky images. All right, so let's talk neutral night filters really quick. You know, I will just showcase here the fact that, you know, a neutral night filter can do an awful lot for night work. I love going out doing night work, you know, whether it's constellations, whether it's the moon, whether it's gonna be the night sky with the Milky Way, sometimes cityscapes at night, and that hazy light pollution that comes up into our frame and almost everywhere that we work is really effectively cut by a good neutral night filter. I started working with the Hoya color intensifying filters, and now I work with the Kase natural night filter. It's really, really something, or neutral night filter. Just slapping that in front, there's no other change in these raw captures other than just switching it up and throwing that filter in front of my lens. So it's just something I always do at night now. It doesn't even limit it to just dealing with the light pollution. It also just makes the Milky Way pop a little bit more from the background, and I really like the color balance that I get when I shoot my camera at 3850 Kelvin. I just go into the Kelvin setting in white balance and I set it at 3850 and put the neutral night filter in front of it, and you get this nice natural bit of blue to the black of space, and it's a real natural look. That's just kind of what I'm after. These are both the same white balance with and without the filter. So, you know, it lets me get images like this from our Death Valley workshop, or this from our Joshua Tree workshop with the legendary 58.95 Noct lens that my good friend Ken Muller brought. And here's, you know, another one with that same lens in Death Valley, and, you know, that filter, it just makes all the difference. I forgot to bring it on this one, and getting the scene neutral and getting the stars to pop was a real pain. I brought it on the Joshua Tree workshop and was much, much happier. So, you know, again, I think this one tells the whole tale. Now, again, these are the raw captures just of the Milky Way, and I just left a bit of horizon in and captured these on my Move Shoot Move Star Tracker. This is with the 20mm 1.8. That really is my favorite lens to shoot the Milky Way these days. I throw that thing on the tracker with the Z9 in the Astro mode, and it's just amazing to work with. So I think if you're gonna take the time and effort to go out and shoot Milky Way, having a night filter, it just makes a huge difference. It's definitely worth having. I bring them for people to share on my workshops and test out if they don't have them. I always bring extras. They are well worth the money you spend on them. Okay, and then finally, let's talk really quickly about graduated, or not graduated, let's talk about neutral density filters and why I don't carry graduated filters for stills work. I get tons of questions, but how do you do graduated filters? I'm going to show you why I don't use graduated filters, but why I do carry neutral density filters out with me every time I go for landscape work. All right, so as I said, I carry 3, 6, and 10 stop neutral density filters with me everywhere I go. And I like to use them both creatively in still photography, just to get longer shutter speeds, as well as in time lapse and video. And I'll talk about that in a second once I run through a little bit with some images here. But here's an example of using it a bit creatively. This is a night with my workshop back in 2019. In Lago Pijo in Patagonia, and it was a beautiful evening. We were out on Lago Pijo. We got out on this island. We had a beautiful view of the Andes here in Torres de Paine. And all of a sudden, I thought we were going to have a great sunset, but then it really got blocked a bit, and you could tell it was going to fizzle. There just wasn't any gap in the west for the sun to get through those clouds. We got, I took this panorama with the last light. There's a lot of movement on the water, and then I thought, well, you know what? I'll do a really long, got a little bit of color up here up high where the light came up over, and I thought, let's just do a really, really long exposure. So, here's one 2 minutes long using a 10 stop neutral density filter. And you can just see how it just softens the water, throws reflections into the spots where the water wasn't too blown by wind. And then the clouds just become surreal with their movement. It's a creative, the minute I saw it on the back of the camera, I thought, wow, that is so much better than what I could get in a still right now. So I do that kind of thing with blurring motion, whether it's clouds, whether it's water, with neutral density filters and still photography all the time, just to get creative. This is one of my favorite examples of that. I'll talk about video and time lapse in just a second, but I will say that, people ask me all the time, why aren't you carrying graduated neutral density filters? And I'll tell you why. I think this morning, which I'm going to do a video next week about this just amazing sandstorm that we experienced in my workshop at dawn in Death Valley. And we marched out there into the jaws of quite a storm. And I think people thought maybe we were crazy, but in the wake of it, everyone's experience was quite amazing. I mean, everybody still talks and raves about that as like the highlight of the workshop, because we got out there and it worked. There was a good chance it could. We got the gap that you dreamed of, and we were in the right place to capture it. But we're in the midst of a sandstorm, and here is an HDR image captured from this image is what the light meter read. This is on the light meter. You take a look. The histogram goes off both sides. We got pure white. We got pure black. But capturing 3 bracketed frames, one on the light meter like this, one 3 stops overexposed for all that shadow detail in the foreground, and one 3 stops underexposed to get the detail in the sun and not have completely blown white. You're gonna have some blown green and yellow, or you're gonna have some blown red, maybe yellow, but you don't wanna blow all 3 channels, looking at your histogram. You can take those 3 differentially exposed images and blend them into this one HDR image. Now, I had schmutz on my lens. I'm going to talk about this image and how I processed the HDR, and also how I cleaned it up using some kind of fun tricks in Photoshop really quickly and easily, actually, to get the final look that I was after in next week's video. I'm going to take you on this little adventure on this morning. But, the fact that I'm not putting some artificial darkened line either here across the dunes or here across the mountains, this looks so much more natural than if I used a neutral density filter. I have all the tones from those combined 3 images in what is a nice histogram for this scene with no pure blown out white, no pure blown out black. I blended this on the meter file, this 3-stop underexposed file, this 3-stop overexposed file to create exactly what I wanted and have all the tonality in one image. And I'm not limited to some straight line of exposure differential. I feel like the straight lines of graduated filters are a hindrance in the post-production process. They rob your photo of quality, not adding to it. And when we have the ability with stills to blend multiple still frames, then landscape photography should really be using this technique. And we'll talk about it next week. It was quite an epic sandstorm to be out in, and I think everybody had a pretty phenomenal time in it. I will just say also, these are all with the 24-120, the new 24-120S Nikon lens, and I just love the way that lens works in backlight situations. It's pretty darn incredible. Even blending multiple exposures, the Sunstar is just phenomenal. So we'll talk all about that next week. And as I promised, let's talk just a little time-lapse stuff. When I'm shooting time-lapse, I want a nice smooth time lapse, all right? I want it to look like the motion is just flowing really beautifully. This is an older time lapse of an exhibit that I did at a big commercial space downtown in Portland, hanging a big panorama of downtown Portland shot with the moon, a full moon and a snowstorm. You see we hung two pieces backwards actually for a second there. But you see how smooth the motion is? Oh, that's going straight into another video. The motion is really smooth. I'm going to just show how it's flowing. That's because I'm capturing half of the time in my time-lapse interval. I think I was shooting a frame every 2 seconds, and it was a second-long exposure using some neutral density. All right, here's one that I captured with my cell phone simultaneously. That's just quick exposures, and you see how it's jerky? It's a completely different kind of capture. I want my time lapses to be smooth and feel like they flow, not to be sort of stop motion like this feels. This is exactly the same interval with a fast shutter speed. Instead of it having neutral density in front of the camera like I shot with my D500 and being smooth and flowing, all right? So how does that translate when we're out in the landscape shooting things? Well, you know, you get things, you want things to be smoothly flowing, you know, like clouds rolling through a scene in the sky. You don't want them to be stuttery. You want them to be moving nice and smoothly. In every scene I'm after, I'm thinking about capturing half the time that's flowing through my scene. And I do exactly the same thing when I'm shooting videos. Even these videos I shoot for the Approaching the Scene series, you know, if I'm shooting at 24 frames a second, I go for a 50th of a second shutter speed. That's easy here in my studio without neutral density, but when I get out and I'm working in the landscape on a bright sunny day, sometimes I have to put 6 or even 10 stops of neutral density in front of my lens to get to that 50th of a second shutter speed at a wide aperture where I'm blooming my background. So video shooters are kind of limited with trying to get to that 50% rule where they're capturing half of the interval between each frame. Time-lapse shooters the same way. The distance in time-lapse between the interval between each shot is what really matters. You know, here it's a 1 minute interval, 30-second shutter speed. All right, so it gives you some ideas. That's why I'm always carrying neutral density. It's both to be creative in my still photography to capture images like this, and it's also to be able to control video and time lapse and get exactly the shutter speed or the amount of time that I want to capture. All right, so that's really it. You know, I hope that you'll join us on Tuesday, this Tuesday, the 12th. For office hours. That's going to be talking about some of the fun times we had in the workshop and taking your questions about all things photographic. Sign up at hudsonhenry.com/office hours. Remember, links to everything I talked about are in this video in its description, as well as over at my website, hudsonhenry.com/ATS links. The filters that I sell and the tripods are at hudsonhenry.com/case and hudsonhenry.com/tripods. Remember that these tripods are going up $100 as we end this week, Friday night, midnight Pacific, the bell tolls, and just because parts are costing us more, they have to go up $100. Sorry about that. Wish it weren't so. So, anywho, I hope everyone has been out there being creative. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we've had some nice weather. The leaves are budding out. It's starting to look like spring. My kids are excited. I can't wait. We're going to Palouse at the end of this month. Got a great group of people joining us up in northeastern Washington to photograph those gorgeous farmscapes and landscapes that look like Tuscany. So I hope everyone else is finding some good creative projects. You know, we had, oh, quick, one final announcement I almost forgot. If you go over to hudsonhenry.com/workshops, you'll find that we have one person for health reasons had to back out of the Tetons workshop this fall. That is the last open slot in any of the 2022 workshops. So there is a Tetons slot that opened. Jump on it fast if you want it. Those have been selling really, really quick. And we're working on 2023, some really fun stuff. We're talking about Glacier. We're talking about Mount Rainier, which is an amazing place to run workshops. Oregon Coast, Charleston. There's some fun things coming. So stay in touch there. We'll see you in office hours. I hope everyone stays safe, stays creative. We'll see you next week.